for me to say I'm so glad that Victor Brick has offered to do this session today on cash flow management. And I'll just tell you, Victor, maybe many of you might know, he's a big business person, Planet Fitness Growth Partners, but he's had a lot of experience. And most importantly, he's not always been able to make payroll and has had a lot of experience with different businesses, especially small businesses. And on a few of the calls that he's been on, that we've been doing with Global Wellness Summit collaborations, he has always been excited about sharing how people need to get very focused on cash flow right now and what to do in a crisis. And so when he offered to possibly do this, we said absolutely yes. So I'm going to just turn it over to Victor right away, because there's so much that you can share and want to share. And we will have you, other people ask questions. I guess I'm going to turn it over to Nancy for a second first with some logistics, and then over to Victor, and we'll get started.
Wonderful. Thank you, Susie, and good morning, good afternoon, evening, everybody. Thanks so much for joining. I'm just going to give you a couple of details and then turn it right over to Victor. The first time that you unmute yourself to speak, please introduce yourself with your name, your company, and your country. And to unmute, you simply go down to the bottom left of the Zoom window. There's a microphone icon with a red line through it. Click it, it will unmute you. And when you are finished, please click it again. That keeps the conversation clearer and cleaner. If you want to see the checkerboard of all of this fabulous mosaic of people and countries, put your cursor to the top right of your Zoom window and choose the gallery view rather than the speaker view. And that will give you everybody's image at once. And as more people join, there's already a second page. Middle of your Zoom screen to the right, there's an arrow. And if you click that, you can see who's on the second page. There is a chat function, bottom, slightly to the right center of your Zoom screen. It says chat. When you click that, it'll open a window to the right of your Zoom window, and you can type either to one person specifically or to everyone, and I would suggest leaving it on everyone, and post questions there. So if you have a question that you want to be sure you remember that gets to Victor later in the call, that's a good place to put it. We will refer to those and try to get as many of those as possible answered. When this session is over, you're going to receive a list of the participants, names and contact information, the people on this call. It is strictly for personal use. In other words, you want to, send an email to Victor and ask another question. You want to connect with someone on the call. It's not for marketing purposes. And so we don't want you to use that to blast out an email to anybody. And without further ado, I think that's all you need to know to begin this. I will moderate and call on people. You can raise your hand or simply unmute and speak when you want. But I'm going to ask Victor to first get this all set up and tell us what he wants us to know about cash flow at this time. So Victor, if you unmute and take it away. Bottom left of your screen to unmute. Sorry, Victor, there you go.
I was trying to find my cursor. Okay, so first things, there are a couple of disclaimers. First, I am not a business guru, but I do have a wealth of experience. They say that success comes from good judgment comes from experience comes from bad judgment. I have a lot of experience. So what I'm going to be telling you is really basic principle, and I understand that everybody's situation is different, every country's different, every business is different. That being said, there are some principles of business that are common among all different situations and no matter what the country. Keep in mind that everything that I say is strictly my opinion. I am not a lawyer. I am not giving legal advice. It is strictly my opinion. And I am speaking from the heart. Take it for what it's worth, but I'm really just trying to help because I've been there. I've been a small business owner. I started with one club. As Susie said, I know what it's like to not be able to make payroll. And it's a terrifying experience. So let's get right to it. The subject at hand is managing cash flow analysis, or managing cash flow. And let's discuss a couple of basic principles. And some of this is philosophy or business according to Victor Brick. I believe that the thing that fills the gap Between the known and the unknown is fear, if you let it. And you need to fill that gap with knowledge and a plan, or that fear will overwhelm you, and it will overwhelm your staff. It will overwhelm your debtors. It will overwhelm your investors. It will overwhelm your landlords. Fill that gap, or fear will. So it basically boils down to another one of our principles, and we've got this principle, this house of values with Planet Fitness Growth Partners, and it has all of our principles of operating the business, and one of them is focus and communication. At a time of crisis, you need to implement, you need to go back to your core values and your business values and how you run your business. You don't rise to the occasion, you fall back on your training. You do not rise to the occasion, you fall back on your training. And part of your training should be focus and communication. And many things that you should have been doing all along become acutely aware of your weaknesses. We've got 75 leases. We didn't even know what was in half the list, almost any of the list. I didn't know what I'd signed personally on. I didn't know what was a force majeure that we could, with no real estate carve-out clause, that I could just stop paying. I knew none of this. That will never happen again. It forced us to get open, organized, focus, and to communicate. So one of the things with the focus of communication, and make no bones about it, people, we are at war. We are at war with a virus. And you should hold a daily council of war with your key advisors. Now, we call it an FOB meeting. We like to put a little whim in everything we do. What's whim? World-class, humorous, inspirational, and memorable. World-class, humorous, inspirational, memorable. So we try to put everything whim. So our meetings are called FOB, SOB, save our business. So we got an SOB meeting. So everybody's an SOB and they're coming to the meeting. So short term, at least, and I want to say one other thing. I realize that some of your people are at different phases depending on where your country is. I'm speaking now from what we're experiencing in the US, and it's just starting. The reality of not having any business is just starting to sink in. So we called SOB meetings every day with our key advisors. Your key advisors might be 2 people. Our key advisors were attorneys, all of our C-level executives, our financial people, every day, because the landscape's always changing. And what you need to do is implement the nursing process. My wife was a nurse, first shock trauma unit in the world, University of Maryland shock trauma. She dealt with life and death every day. And the way they would work, and it's the way the nursing processes work everywhere, they assess, they plan, they implement, they evaluate, they modify. Assess, plan, implement, evaluate, modify. Right now you're assessing. We are assessing. What's the landscape? What do our leases say? What are our how much is our total payroll? Who's this? Who's that? Assess everything. Then you put your plan together. Then you evaluate, and you evaluate daily or weekly. You assess, plan, implement, evaluate, and modify accordingly. So we're going to talk about how to do that with the big categories. And the big categories are what? Rent, payroll, operating expenses, debt. Those are the big ones. You plan, assess, evaluate. Do you use the nursing process there and come up with the right plan? You can control your asset, your cash flow. You don't, and you'll end up short. You'll end up in a crisis situation. So when you do assess, you need to be real. You need to be realistic. You cannot be I'm as optimistic as anybody coming or going, but I'm a realistic optimist. You guys know that if you don't know, read about Admiral Stockdale, the longest standing American prisoner of war ever, 8 years prisoner of war in Vietnam. They asked him how he got out. Jim Collins, Good to Great, in the book Jim Collins, Good to Great. How did he make it? His response, the optimists died first. You cannot just be an optimist. You got to be a realistic optimist. We're in this thing. We could be in it for a while. It's going to get worse before it gets better, but I'm going to live. I'm going to get out. Admiral Stockdale, the optimist, died first. So be realistic when you assess the landscape of your country and what's going on, your financial situation, what it's going to take to get through, and when it is you're going to get through. Do not be one of these 30 days it'll go away and we'll open our doors and be at 100% revenue. It's not going to happen. It is not going to happen. We believe, and most good business people do, you hope for the best, plan for the worst. Hope for the best, plan for the worst. So when you do that, you have 3 scenarios for everything. 3. Best case, what'll probably happen, worst case. And when you go worst case, realize it could happen. So plan for worst case. Who would ever thought the entire world would be shut down? But it is. That's worst case. Is it going to be 1 month? Is it going to be 2 months? Is it going to be 3 months? Whatever it is, worst case, plan for worst case, hope for best case. So basically, a lot of what I'm going to say is going on Asia is a barometer. And I don't have the luxury of seeing everybody on screen, but I know a lot of people are from Asia. And of course, Asia is ahead of everyone else in terms of what actually happened. That being the case, remember what I said, I'm a realistic optimist. I live in the United States. We're not Asia. We haven't implemented a lot of the things that they did, and we haven't implemented this violently. So I'm taking what they're doing and putting on a third. However they recovered, I'm putting on a third. Because a lot of people are saying, well, we're the US, we're going to be faster. No, we're going to be slower. If we were slower reacting, we're going to be slower coming out. So take your situation, plan for the worst. All righty? So basically, as I see it, using Asia as a barometer, because I'm very close with a lot of people in Asia with very large organizations, they were closed, almost completely closed for 2 months. I'm going 3 months in the US. And now they're just ramping out of it. So I don't really know the ramp, but I'm going for 3 months of a ramp. 3 months completely closed, 3 months of a ramp. When I say ramp, 60% revenues first month, 70% revenues the second month, 80% the third. In my best case scenario, I have us going back to 90%. If my business cannot function at 90%, I'm in trouble because I don't believe it will ever get to 100 in my business. Some of you guys may be different. Why? Your business may flourish. Your business, depending on your business model, it might be exactly where the puck is headed as to where the puck is, because you don't depend on 200 people being in a 20,000 square foot box or a 2,000 square meter box, which is against everything that they've been being told for the last 3 months and which might never occur again. You may be an online business. So take your own business and budget accordingly. So let's take the rent. And if you could hold your questions till the end, because you can kind of tell I'm kind of on a roll here and I get into these ramps and I just kind of best my free flow and then I can answer questions. And just so you know, I have 2 of our attorneys and my CFO on to help me answer questions because why? They're my support group. They're part of my council of war and I can't do everything. I can't know everything. I depend on my generals. I depend on my generals in their area. So I've asked them to be on. And so if there's a question that I can't answer, I'll refer to them. So first with rent, remember what I said, you got to assess. So create a spreadsheet. And on that spreadsheet, you should have things like the location, the landlord, the amount of rent, the annual rent, the monthly rent, the length of the lease. Don't worry about writing it down. We will share our spreadsheet with everybody on this sheet. And if you have 1 lease or you've got 100 leases, your spreadsheet should look very similar to ours so that you can look up at any given time, whether it be this crisis or any crisis. It might be a crisis 2 years from now with a wall falling down on one of the clubs. Who pays for it? And it's all there. So we'll send you that spreadsheet. So once that's the assessment plan. What do we have? What's our leases? What's our obligation? What's the personal guarantee? Then you've got to look at it individually. And most countries are, while they're different, most countries are very similar to a certain degree. And it's kind of called English law. I hate it that the English are still kind of getting the ones that pick, but most things are based on English law, quite frankly. So here we go. Have that spreadsheet. And the most important things to look at in most cases, I don't know your country, but in most cases, personal guarantees and a provision called force majeure. If you have a personal guarantee, do not assume that you can ignore it. What's he going to do? Sue me. Guess what? He just might. So you better know what's in that personal guarantee. You try to work something out with the landlord, but if he draws a hard line, you would better be prepared to pay it or face the consequences. That's what a personal guarantee is for, times like this. So make no bones about it. That's a decision you have to make. If you have a personal guarantee, can I pay it? Or will I challenge it and not have to pay it? A force majeure with is states that if there's an act of God or something, you can't conduct business, you don't have to pay rent. But usually, again, going for the US, usually there is a carve out that says except for rent, which means you have to pay your rent. Most force majeures you have to pay. Every now and then with a force majeure, they will have not carved out rent. Sometimes they didn't want to, or sometimes they forgot. Check your lease. If they did not carve out rent, you might be within your you might be perfectly within your rights not to pay. We didn't know. We didn't know what we had force majeures and what we didn't. We found out, thank goodness, 10% of our leases were force majeures, no carve out. We sent them a letter and we don't have to pay rent. And here's the beauty of that. And I'm talking fast because there's a lot of material and I want to get time for questions. The beauty of a force majeure is you never have to pay it back. If you work out a deal with a landlord, usually you will have to pay it back. We have 70 leases, not one lease, not one, as the landlord, 75. Not one time has the landlord said, we'll forgive rent. They've almost all said, we'll abate rent, but sooner or later you pay it back. Force majeure, you never have to pay back. So that's the first thing you look for. So once you get the spreadsheet and you know what you're up against, before you start calling the landlords, that's the assess part, now you put your plan in place. You implement. And the plan is contact the landlords, see what you can do about working out a deal. Tell the ones with a force majeure, unfortunately, you're not going to pay. You're very nice with all of this. And with the others, you try to work out a payment plan. And you ask for abated rent, which means they forgive it and just start it up when you can. 75 asks, 75 no's. We did get, for the most of them, deferred rent, which means, but we'll allow you to not pay rent for the next 3 months and tack it on the next 12 months or 24 or whatever. So you'll probably get deferred rent, spread out over a time period. Start by asking abated. You never know. You might get a really kind-hearted person that says, I understand, you don't have to pay. But know that most of the time you'll have to pay your rent back. If you call and try to keep it personal, even if you don't know your landlords. If you know your landlords, it's easy. If you don't, try to make it personal. If you do not, we recommend, this is not legal advice. I'm telling you what we are doing. Let me rephrase it. This is what we're doing. If we can't call and talk to them personally, we send a letter. If they don't respond to the letter, we are not paying rent on the first. We are basically forcing them to the negotiations table. That's what we're doing. I'm not telling you to do it. I'm telling you what we're doing. If they send us a form letter, we are forcing them to negotiation. We're ignoring the form letter and we're not paying rent and we're forcing them to the negotiation table. If they have contacted us verbally and we've gone back and forth, whatever they've said we had to do, we are going to do, because we realize sooner or later we're going to have to pay that rent back, and we don't want to incur possible ramifications up the road when we're doing business and everybody's settled down and all of a sudden they start going after people because now they can't. So those are some of the steps we're taking. I know it was a little general, but if you have questions at the end, those are some of the things we'll be able to discuss, answer questions on. The one thing we are doing, as I told you, is we're paying personal guarantees if we can't work out a deal. Do not risk personal guarantees. Okay, so that kind of gets with rent. So now we go into payroll. And payroll is a whole different story. Rent, you have no control over, and you really have to ask for permission, and you're dealing with people usually that have capital. Payroll, you're dealing with your children. You're dealing with your staff. So you got to be true to your values. And we refer back to that chart. And the first step on that foundation of our house of values is culture eats strategy for breakfast. So we've built our whole company on culture. Now all of a sudden we have this tidal wave come. How can we just let everybody go? You're going to be judged by the type of business you are, by how you take care of your staff during times of crisis. So we have a phased plan. Once we assessed how much are we paying these people, how much are we paying those people, how much we're paying these people, and then we have this chart, which we will send you, that you can adjust every week depending on cash flow. We let this group go, how much do we save? We cut these people back to 10%, how much can we save? What you don't want to do is have to keep redoing math. Remember, you want focus, communication, focus, communication, focus, communication. You want to be able to plug numbers into this chart week to week, depending on the scenario. And everything adjusts, and you see whether it's worth doing it or you've got to do it or whatever. So it's constant monitoring. You're like this general on a battlefield, or a quarterback on a football field, or a coach in a soccer or football match, constantly moving chess pieces around on the chessboard as the chessboard changes. So this is what we decided to do. First thing is, some people, and I'm talking about people much more successful than me, said the exact opposite of what I'm going to tell you. They said, get rid of everybody first, assess what you can and can't get from the government, and what help you can get, and what landlord concessions you can get, and all of that second. You can always bring them back depending on the cash capital you're able to collect or entitled to. We took the exact opposite. We kind of hunkered down, said, before we start destroying this company that we built 15 years in the making, it's worth it to us for a couple of $100,000 of payroll. And in our case, our payroll is probably $4 billion a month. You know, it's pretty significant. We're not talking a couple of dollars. But to us and our core values, it was worth it to hold on for a month. 2 weeks for all part-time staff, and then 1 month for everybody till we saw what the playing field was. And sure enough, governments come forward with some programs that, if we can get them, we can save everyone. I'm a big guy for motivation, as we all are. I know you all are, and you all read just like I do. And one of the things my personal assistant gave me was this book by on Shackleton, and you guys probably know his Admiral Shackleton, his adventure to the South Pole, and the ship got frozen in, and he was able to save his entire staff, his entire crew. It was a phenomenal adventure, but he saved his entire crew. We're trying to save our entire crew, but we might not be able to, depending on how the landscape changes. So assess what your payroll is and who you're paying what, evaluate your values and what you're going to do, and then monitor it weekly as you assess what relief you can get. So what we did was, part-time people, while they're great and we love them, let's face it, they come and they go, and if they get a better deal, they're going to go just as quickly as you're going to keep them if you could. So we gave them 2 weeks to get their feet on the ground. There's already programs for them, and then we did let them go. We have several layers of management: assistant managers, general managers, and then of course directors. The assistant manager crew, we figured out how much it was, the whole echelon staff, and then we figured out how much we'd save by reducing their pay, and then how much we'd save eliminating. And after a month, and it's coming up now, well, it's until the 17th, we'll assess what we've received from government funding and landlord concessions and our cash flow, and our cash flow is zero, is plain flat zero, but these other things, what we will do with them. And then if need be, then we go to the general managers, and the options are, of course, no change, reduction in pay, which is what we're going to do for sure, and then termination if need be. And it's going to be by echelon as opposed to a blanket. And we're going to hold on to, like Shackleton, we're going to hold on to these people as long as we can. Now, here's the thing. It's kind of a conflict, and most things are. It's really Sophie's choice. Which child are you going to choose? You know, a big military historian, and General Lee always said that, Confederate general, he said, it's so difficult being a general because you must order part of the destruction of the thing you love the most in order to save the thing you love the most. You must order your army into battle, which will cause the destruction of part of that army in order to save the entire army. You, to save your business, hopefully you will not face this, but you may have to face the destruction of part of your business to save your business. And you had better model it out and scale it out and know where that point is. And then you have a option. The whole boat goes down and everybody drowns, or you will have to ask some of the people to go into the water to save the rest. It's quite a yeah, I don't have to explain it to you guys. It's a terrible decision to have to make, but you want to know when that is. In our case, we want to know when that is, and we want to be able to hold on to the people as long as possible. Going back to the boat concept and the Titanic, what did they say? Well, you know, what did DiCaprio say? Stay with the boat as long as possible. Stay with the boat as long as possible. We want to keep those people on as long as we can. So we will send you that graph or that worksheet where you can play with your own payroll and see what you could save by quickly moving around, and then compare it to your cash flow. So there's 3 real forms we can send you. The one is the real estate form. The second is the payroll spreadsheet where you can adjust your payroll on the fly. And the third is your cash flow analysis, where when you plug the real estate numbers in and the payroll numbers in, you can see what your cash flow is going to be based on. Some of you may be still generating cash through online and through limited whatever. So I'm not assuming everybody's at 0. So that's where you have to manage that. So you constantly be evaluating and you modify as needed. One other recommendation, when you do have to terminate key people, furlough as opposed to termination. Furlough is less onerous. It's a little easier to accept, and it allows you to pay benefits without them having to go through the hassle of getting on any type of benefit program that they might be. And I'm talking for the United States. I don't know how it relates in other countries. But in the United States, if you furlough somebody, you can keep them on benefits, and it's much easier to bring them back because technically they're still on the payroll. And as you guys know, benefits is one of the major concerns of most people. It's almost as valuable as salaries. So it's a way to keep people back. Now, obviously, if you don't want the person to come back if they weren't doing a good job, or you don't want to keep their position after the whatever, then that wouldn't be an option. But for those that you want to try to stay with the ship, think of furloughing. Then we get to the operational. Remember, the 4 big ones are rent, payroll, operations, and debt. Operationally, it's pretty simple. I'm sure you guys have all done that. You just go down your list, figure out what you have to pay and what you can't. But there's 2 ways to look at it. One is what you don't have to pay at all, or you can cut out moving forward. The other is what you owe and how to handle that. And we've shut down it. When you're closed, it's easy to shut everything down, but what about all the money you owed, like your utility bills and your marketing and all these things? And we looked at it 2 ways. First thing we looked at is going back to our core values. One of our core values is always do the right thing. We're going to try to do the right thing here. And the right thing is, yeah, we're small, and we're not that small, but we're small compared to GE and landlords and some of these guys. But compared to the one shop person doing our social media, we're big. So are we going to stiff that person? What's she going to do? Sue us? No, she's not. But she's dependent on that money to live. So we've decided to pay all the little vendors, small vendors, work out deals with everybody we can that we know we want to keep a good relationship with and that have done a great job for us, and that we owe some sort of consideration to. And then a lot of them, like, let's take the utilities, we're just not paying past utility bill. What they're going to do, shut it down? Guess what? We're out of business. Not out of business, we're closed. So what do we care? You know, and when we open, we'll repay it. We'll pay what we owe, and we'll be fine. So we, you know, for things from Walmart, you know, that we bought, and we buy a lot of stuff in bulk, we're just not paying. And when the time comes, we'll repay it, we'll get caught up, and we'll move forward. And we haven't ruined a relationship, put anybody in hardship, and really done anything unethical. So that's a decision you have to make. But the one thing you do need to do is immediately go and stop all automatic drafts, because a lot of our vendors were automatic drafts and you don't even realize it. And 2, shut down everything you can as if you're going to be out of business for at least 3 months and maybe more. Like I said, there's not much more to discuss there. And then finally, the debt. And the debt is a touchy one because a lot of people just assume along with the rent, just stop paying. And the debt is critical because, again, if you don't expect to be operating your business after this is over, it's no big deal. But if you do, you have to understand what it's going to do if you don't pay your debt service. That's where you need legal advice. You really need legal advice on your debt service, because despite what a lot of people think, and that is the last thing I'm going to pay is the loan to the bank, it might be the first thing you need to pay. Because for all you know, they get in trouble. They sell your loan to somebody else. That guy throws you out and puts their son in. That's what happened to Sam Walton. If you guys don't know that, that's what happened to Sam Walton. Sam Walton got into trouble in his first 5 and dime in Kingfisher, Oklahoma. The landlord threw him out, put his son in there. Sam moved down the street to Bentonville, Arkansas. It was 10, 11 miles away. And guess who's laughing now? Those things happen, people. They do happen. That's why you got to be reading avidly and be a student of history for all of this stuff. So check what you can and can't do. Come up with a plan with your lawyer or financial advisor, whoever you know and trust, and make sure they know what they're talking about. Then go to your lender and try to work out a deal. What you're trying to do is buy time. And lenders are in the business of making money. So they're not going to forgive loan payments. They'll do what what most landlords do. They'll put it on the back end. They'll spread it over time, that whatever it is, as long as they basically get their return. The thing is this, though, you have to be careful about putting your business at risk and your ability to borrow at risk. Because once you start compromising your deal with lenders, they have long memories. So we have a lot of debt. I mean, a lot of debt. The payments are in the millions every week, every month. And we are determined to pay them as long as we can to not hurt our banking relationships. Why? And I'm sure you guys have all sat on all these meetings about the great opportunities that are going to be available when this thing ends. And they will be. And the last thing you want to do is have a reputation not paying your bills, not being able to get capital, and basically not being able to take care of growth and opportunity. Now, if it comes to, I will tell you this, and I'm knock on wood, heaven forbid, if it comes to me losing the business or not paying my lenders, I'm not going to pay the lenders. But in my scenario, they're the last people we will not pay. And heaven forbid, if we get to that point, yeah, well, I'm going back to being a tennis pro, teaching tennis and coaching basketball, and forget all this other stuff. So the final thing I'm going to say is that is the final stage, and then we'll open up for questions. Remember, the optimists die first. Be realistic. And second, remember Shackleton. I hope we all agree to try to save your staff if you can at all costs and have a plan to do it. And then, but finally, that being said, remember Lee. And sometimes, in the worst case, you do have to order the destruction of the thing you love the most, part of the thing you love the most, to save what you love the most. So with that, we'll open it up to questions. And go ahead, Nancy.
Victor, thank you so much. I mean, that was just, it's like getting an MBA class.
Yes.
And thank you for so honestly sharing what's happening in your business and in your world, which is obviously of great value. And I want to just mention that we will get from Victor all the things that he has promised to share and make sure that they're attached to the email you receive after this call. So let's open it up for questions for Victor now.
Yes, may I? Margaret from Brazil.
Please introduce yourself, your company, and your country.
Yes, Margaret Brepo, Lapinha Spa, Brazil, south of Brazil. Thank you so much, Victor. That was really, it covered the whole scenery. And much of this is happening in Brazil, and I'm very thankful we have gone through most of them. But I have a question to you. What about when we think of returning to the business? We are planning a campaign, for example, 100 days after we return. For the 100 first people, we will sell for such a price. Is it okay, I mean, to think of cash flow when we return? What are the strategies you could share with us? Thank you.
Okay, so what I will say is that every situation is different, and I can't get into specific campaigns. What I can say is plan on a gradual ramp of 60%, 70%, 80% as a worst case scenario. And then anything you can do to shorten 60 each month. You'll get back 60% business in the first month you're open, 70% the second, 80% the third. And then anything you can do to shorten that, do it. Do it. So the program that you mentioned seems to do that. I don't know enough about it. I've been to Brazil quite a few times. My buddy owns the largest health club chain in Brazil, so I'm quite familiar with the Brazil market. And I guarantee you, he will be doing deals like he has never done before, because when you open, it will be time to try to recapture your market share. So my philosophy would be, don't worry about cost per member or cost per whatever and try to immediately get all your money back. Look at getting your market share back. And then as you can gradually increase revenue from them, but it's kind of, that's a philosophy. Some people are going to go after their small market and try to get more from them and adjust their prices up because they're down in cash. We're going to give a lot of freebies to get our market share back, knowing over the course of a 12-month or 24-month period, we're going to be way ahead of the game.
Victor, thank you. I'm going to read a question that's come in the chat, which is, what things are you doing, or is your team doing in this time, this sort of downtime, to improve the business going forward?
Well, everything that I've said will improve the business going forward because of the focus. So the rent is a SOP, standing operating procedure now for us to implement. Where when we did the payroll, guess what we did as well? We assessed every single position. So now we know that we were fat, dumb, and happy. A buddy once told me, and he's from Holland, and he has the largest health club group in Europe. And he said, you should run your business like you could go out of business at any time. And I thought to myself, we're way too big for that. Guess what? So we didn't run our business like we could go out of business. We had fluff all over the place. Well, you run that sucker as lean as you can, and you collect as much cash as you can. What do they say? Anybody know how many months, I don't care where you live in the world, how many months of personal income should you have for a downturn? The answer, 3. How many of you have it? Here's a better question. Guess what? How many months of business income, total free cash, should you have available if you had 0 income? The answer, 3. How many of you have it? How long are we going to probably be closed? China and Asia have closed too. I just told you, probably 3. So the point is, we, Victor Brick and Planet Fitness Growth Partners, should have been running our business like that all along. That will never happen again. We're kind of closing the barn door after the cows have all gone, or whatever that statement is. I didn't grow up on a farm. But the point is, that was a lesson we learned. So you go through and you do these things and you realize you're getting better all the time. We're going to streamline our corporate overhead. We're going to pay a better example of our leases. We're going to manage our capital better. We're going to maintain cash flows better. And I'm going to have to stop letting Lynn do all that shopping she does in Miami at all those high-end stores, because we need cash and I can't trade those dresses in right now. Oh boy, she came in and she's scowling at me. So anyway.
I think, okay, thank you so much, Victor. Martin, did you have a question? You're muted, yeah.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Martin Goldman, ASPA International. Victor, I want to come back to your realistic versus the optimist. If we listen to governments around the world, I don't think one government is telling us the truth about what's going on. So we have to develop our own timeline over the next, let's say, 9 months till the end of the year. Wouldn't it be wise that this forum actually put together a timeline of realistic exiting from coronavirus. You mentioned 3 months. I personally think it's going to be much longer. We hear about new cases in China today. We hear about this asymmetrical contagion, which is quite frightening this morning. But we as captains of industry need to go back to our staff. We need to go back to our clients and tell them what a realistic timeline is. And we need to come together and develop that timeline.
I agree with everything you said. And the more I think about it, 3 months from now would have been 1 month already, but even still, that might be optimistic. And I believe that we will be open for business, but I think there will be a ramp. I don't think they could close commerce indefinitely. I just don't see how that could occur. But that's where the ramp comes, that we might only be operating at half capacity. But regardless, I may be wrong, for sure. And it is for, remember, the fear and the known and the unknown, we can help fill that fear in. But yeah, I agree 100%, Martin, and that's what this organization's for. Yes, I shouldn't say that's what this organization's for. That's one of the functions this organization could serve, even though, quite frankly, it's not what it's for. It wasn't its intent, but these are special times, and somebody has to be the leader, and we have a lot of wealth of knowledge. And I agree with you about the governments, of course, and that you have to find your own truth. Yes. Yeah. One final comment on the first comment. What we're doing with the staff, we are doing a bunch of professional development and contacting and staying in touch with the members regularly. All righty, go ahead, Nancy. I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry. Sorry, Victor, to interrupt. I think Mike Brueggemann, you unmuted. I think you must want to ask a question.
Yeah, Victor, Mike Brueggemann, CEO of Organic Mail in the United States. We're a consumer products company, and I have a couple of different businesses. And right now, one of them is cash floating two of the other businesses that are basically have no revenue right now. What's your opinion on that? Because two of them are going to serve the spa industry, and the spa industry, I don't believe, is going to ramp up at that same, a 60. It's not going to be a 60% ramp up. It's going to be slower than that.
Okay, so a couple of things. Keep in mind when you ask specific questions, I'm always going to answer in general. So in general, be careful about one company being too intimately involved with the other, because it could violate or could prevent the company that needs it from qualifying for grants because it's too closely associated with a successful company. The government, although the government, there's pros and cons to every government. In this particular case, this CARES Act in the US is intended for people that do not have access to capital elsewhere. So if it was a real successful company, but the same owner is funding another company, there could be a relationship that might prevent that company that really needs it from getting financial assistance. The second thing is judging from, I've got my book back there, the book Winning by Jack Welch. When he took over GE and this huge company was floundering, and he made it the most successful company in the world at one time, bigger than Apple and Google and all of them. They came up with 3 philosophies of business: fix it, sell it, close it down. So my advice to you, Michael, really quickly, those other 2 companies, fix it, sell it, close it down. And close it down sometimes is the only option because there are no buyers. So that's my recommendation.
Victor, thank you so much. I'm going to just consolidate 2 of there are questions coming up in the thread about, and I suppose you'd need a little bit of a crystal ball for this, and maybe other people can help with this answer, but how soon do you feel wellness, people will seek wellness, destinations and the hospitality sector? Do you have a sense of that coming back and how long it will take for that to come back? And perhaps there are others on the call that might have insight into that too, Susie being one of them.
Well, my personal opinion is that it's a really good sector. It's got a really loyal following. You have not historically depended on the masses, like Planet Fitness depends on the masses. So if there's a feeling among 20% of Americans that they don't want to get in gathering areas, we're in trouble. Whereas your clientele, is already, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm in that space as well. I have investments in spas and things. So I know that it's the upper echelon. It's the more educated. So I think there's it's a great space to be in. I'm not sure what the near future holds. So that's my opinion, personally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anthony?
Hi, Anthony DiGiuseppe from New York, DiGiuseppe Architects. I think I could shed a little bit of light on this in the hospitality industry and tourism. We just came back from, before all this started, from the HT Summit conference where my friend Bruce Ford from Lodging Econometrics gave a prediction of where the state of the hospitality industry and where it's going in the future. And then recently, as of last week, updated that based on the coronavirus. So the thing is with hospitality is that there is, the hoteliers have been making money hand over fist over the past 8 years. And so there is a lot of cash available that they have as long as they conserved it. But the thing is that going forward, it's going to be more than 3 months. Because if in fact, as my clients have done, they've pretty much closed the hotels in order to save their hotels and reduce their cash flow, which was tremendous. They have said to me, well, we'll continue back on the projects after this is over. But I know it's not going to happen just turning the key and starting again, because most of them are depending on tourism. And tourism is not going to change over 3 months. It's going to be over at least 6 months before that happens, where people feel comfortable with traveling. With borders closed, with the virus still, like as you said, Victor, that there was renewed reports from China of possibly reinfections. And so the hospitality industry has the money to do it. Things that have been under construction now have already been funded, so that the money has already been there, and those clients or those developers are still going to move forward with those projects. Unfortunately, here in New York, non-essential workers construction has fallen into the non-essential category recently. So those projects are stopped.
Anthony, I'm sorry, I'm going to just interrupt. Appreciate your comments and your input there. I want to be sure to get to a couple more questions for Victor. I'm mindful of the time.
Okay.
Does anybody else have questions for Victor? Yes, Jocelyn?
No, I would like to know if it's possible to really have that, what we are talking about, to be able to listen it again. I would like really to share it with my general manager. And is it possible to have it?
Well, we do record these conversations as a matter of form, just so that we can refer back, and because if we need, some information to share, and we will, if Victor is comfortable sharing this conversation, then we are happy to share it as an audio file that, but that we could have a conversation with Victor and let you guys know that and make it part of what we send you after.
Okay, thank you very much. It will be a real gift, Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And yes, Ganeshan?
Hi. Yes, hi. Victor,
Good name, and could you just say your name, company, and country?
Oh, yes, I'm so sorry. My name is my name is Ganeshan. I work for Zulal Wellness Resort by Chivasum. We are based in Qatar, one of the wellness resort here. So going by what Victor said, assuming that, maybe after 3 months, coronavirus is going to slow down, and considering that we are in a project, so what would be the good time, to start off the resort?
Okay, so we're getting a lot of questions about when the virus is going to end and what should we do once we open. I personally feel that that's a topic that would be very interesting to discuss But the topic here was how to conserve cash flow until that occurs. Like
Yeah.
Martin said, it could be 4 to 5 months. If you remember what I said 3 months of close, but I said a 3-month ramp up. So I'm talking 6
Yes.
months total, but maybe it is 4 or 5 months that we are totally closed. So that was the immediate. What should we start doing and when should we start planning? I think that's a whole different topic, but I can tell you, you should start planning now for 2 reasons. The fear of the known and the unknown for yourself and for your staff, what you can do, and also to keep focused, because if you let it, your mind's going to just start gravitating to all the negative stuff. Always start thinking, it's like the wedding in a year and a half from now. Every time you work on planning it, you get happy. So start making your plans now, but it is a topic for sure that is a great topic to discuss, because nobody can say for sure.
I'm going to just jump in to say one thing in that vein, and that is that we are still and continue to, and we are holding our summit in Tel Aviv in November, and we are filling the void between the known and unknown with very focused work on what we know the future will be, and it helps us to stay very excited and focused and forward thinking. And I think that that's just, you know, an example of believing that, you know, being a realistic optimist, you know, hopeful, and, you know, the summit's not next month, but believing that by then we will gather together in person. Another question for Victor?
A comment here, if I may.
Yes. Introduce yourself.
Yes.
Introduce yourself.
Yes.
Hold on. Introduce yourself, please.
Margaret from Brazil.
Oh, Margaret. Okay.
Yes. We have put lives and also lectures to answer people's questions. And some requests are coming from nurses and doctors. They say, when we finish this, we would love to go to you. So I think an idea for us to change the focus would be to take care of the people who cares. Many people from public health, all the people who are on the front, they will need our space, our knowledge, our service. So we could already start thinking on this way, how to change a bit our focus, to perhaps make it a bit cheaper, but to attend the needs of these people who are on the front.
Thank you so much.
There are so many things that we could do. That's a phenomenal idea, but there are so many things. As I said, it's a whole topic of discussion. Just so you know, and I'm a big mental health advocate. I have the John W. Brick Mental Health Foundation. Over the weekend in Nashville, Tennessee, more people died from suicide than from the coronavirus. In one city, 9 people took their lives, and it's going to get worse. And this is where wellness is going to be. What we do and what you do is going to become more critical than ever. And if you position yourself properly, 1, you'll be able to put a dent in the universe, and 2, you will be able to make a nice business and a nice living from it, because it's going to become mainstream. People are going to realize after all this what's important, and they're going to need fellowship. They're going to need all the things that we provide and you provide. And it's how can we get through this tough time and come out on the other end? And that's where the discussion comes in, because there's going to be a lot of people that aren't going to make it. There's just going to be a lot, but the one business-wise I'm talking about, the ones that do, they will have the opportunity to take advantage of things, which is why I said don't ruin your banking relationships. But I see it. The world has, I keep saying the world has never had this happen before. It has in 1918. In 1918, they had a bigger epidemic than this. More people died in the Spanish flu epidemic than in World War I and World War II combined. It went from 1918 to 1919, and to your point, Martin, it lasted a lot longer than a couple of months. But the point is this: what came after 1919? Does anybody remember? The Roaring what? The Roaring
20s.
Because everybody, World War I, the flu, man, I got to get out and do something. Sports, movies, everything. And that's what's going to happen here, because people need fellowship. They need activity, they need, and we're going to benefit.
This is all very good news for the wellness industry. I think everybody has to weather this storm, but I think you're right, Victor. We are, you know, positioned to really help and to understand. We just have to survive now and get to the future. What we have time for maybe one last question. Yes, Ala.
Sorry, may I say something?
I'm just going to ask Ala, who we haven't heard from, to just say to us, yes.
From Latvia. Could you share a bit more on how do you keep your big team motivated during this time? I mean, what's just some specific examples?
Well, my wife brought in some notes and stuck them in my hand as usual, but it's so important to keep people connected. So the first thing we do, which is kind of unique, is we have one of these meetings, like what you're looking at. We call it an all hands huddle every day at 3 o'clock. And I give a little bit of motivational or a joke or whatever, and then Lynn leads an exercise. Every day, all hands, all across the country. Right now, it's 250 people still on board. And so we do that every day. We give, and then it's 5 days a week, so other days different people lead and we get people show their leadership. The other thing we do is we give staff assignments in terms of professional development. And we, you know, when you got 75 health clubs, you got members calling all the time. So we pass on every call from a member to the person, the general manager of the club for which they call. So they're still involved with the members. And then of course we do send out motivational messages and things. But the big thing is that all hands huddle. And then with the staff, and the management staff, we still have our normal regular meetings.
Victor, thank you so much. There's 1 minute. I'm going to ask Susie for a closing thought, and then Victor for you for one closing thought for everybody. Susie?
Thank you, Victor. That was fantastic. The only thing I want to add is that what we have learned, part of our DNA is that collaboration is valuable. And that's why we have the summit. That's why we're doing these calls, because we can learn from each other. We can encourage each other. And so we're going to continue to do that. There's a lot of help and solutions in collaboration. So I'll just leave it at that. Over to you, Victor.
I couldn't agree more. I attend a lot of conferences. The whole reason I have volunteered to do this is because of how important this is. You should do the same. Form these little meetings in your area, in your country, in your space. Offer to exchange ideas, facilitate. Don't enlighten and be lecturing, and facilitate. But here's the reason why you do it. You do it as much for yourself as for them. I need to be connected to you guys as much as you need to hear what I have to say. We all need to be connected. And let's hope after this thing's over, the whole world is a little closer and a little bit more understanding of each other. And that's why I'm always available. I was taken in by a woman in Seattle once when I was down on my luck, and I asked to pay her back. And all she said to me was, this was back when I was very impressionable, and you know, I won't get into why I was out there, but it was, yes, a high school girlfriend. But anyway, she says to me, when I tried to pay her back for the week she put me up, she goes, just pass it on, child, just pass it on. And that's all I've been trying to do ever since. Just pass it on, child, just pass it on.
Well, Victor, we're very grateful that you've passed this on to us. Beatrice, if you will unmute everyone for a moment, I just really feel like you deserve a round of applause, a global round of applause, Victor, for your time and energy and expertise in sharing it so generously with us.